So we are on to our second episode of Waiting for Answers. I don't believe we need to do name intros because we have all of that. Let's start off talking about why it is the first of the year. Let's go right off with that. First of the year, a lot of people have these goals that are, I want to lose weight, I want to do this, I want to do that. Anything we kind of like, so talking about the book is a great place to start at the beginning of the year. Tell me why.
Well, I would say, first of all, everyone makes these resolutions. These resolutions are going to lose weight, they're going to go to the gym. That lasts about the first 2 weeks of January. Because resolutions in and of themselves probably don't really work. What does work is in the moment, what am I going to do in the next 5 minutes? And when it comes to weight loss, what am I going to eat? And that daily, minute to minute habits probably make more of a difference in our intentionality than the idea that I'm going to do this over the long term, because it's just too long to sustain that. So I would say, what am I going to do in the next hour? How am I going to prepare what I eat? And when am I going to get my exercise? And if you could keep it on that, basically micro level, it becomes management and you might have some success. So certainly if you read our book, there's multiple chapters that I'm going to read a chapter every day and I'm going to adhere to it. I think that's one way to start.
I think it's also important to be kind to oneself in these times. Is people set up these extraordinary goals. If they don't reach it, they feel like they failed. And then they stop it. And then they say, well, I'll have to wait till next year. Once more, I haven't been able to fulfill. As Dr. Terry mentioned, stay in the moment. The mindfulness is so important. In fact, that's one of the best techniques when you're trying to be healthy, is to become much more mindful in the mind.
I agree. And then this may be a little bit, I don't know if it's off subject or whatever, but one of the things that I've really been encouraging is from the perspective of riding a horse. So if you are in the arena and you are taking jumps, you approach your first fence, you line it up, you make sure that your horse is coming in straight, has the right strides, and then you stop thinking about that jump and you immediately look to the next one. So how am I going to land this? Am I going left? So do I need to be on the left lead when I come down? Or am I going right? Am I straight ahead with a couple more fences? And I use that metaphor as a way to say, where are you going this year? So that you know how you're going to land this thing. So I have some clients, which is exciting for me as a runner, who said, I'm going to run a 5K. Okay, that's great. Which one and when is it? Well, we're from Binghamton, the bridge run in May. It's like, okay, now we can back it up. How do you need to land in January that sets you up for your May project? I have other clients who are trying to organize their work schedule. Back it up, because when we talk about lifestyle changes, it's everything. It's our work, it's our sleep, it's our spiritual being, it's everything. And so we don't necessarily have to look at just our diets per se, but rather what are the things that are getting in our way of getting a better work-life balance. And we start there as opposed to necessarily our diets. But that was the analogy I've been using to help my clients. How are you landing in January that send you in the direction you want to go?
I love that. And something that we're seeing that yesterday actually was, I believe, Quitter's Day of January, that it's January 9th. That is when people usually tend to give up because it's 9 days into the new year, so on and so forth. People put a lot on their plate at once. What is the importance of not overloading yourself and creating routines, but not throwing too much into that routine? Like not saying, I'm going to run a 5K, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. What is a healthier way of kind of maybe going at it in a steps way instead of trying to do it all at once to the point you get overwhelmed and then you just give it all up?
I think the foundation to it is mindset. In other words, seeing this whole process is giving yourself something rather than depriving yourself of something. And that's why diets most of the time don't work, because people see it as deprivation on a diet. Most people don't celebrate that. They said, no, I'm on a diet. So the point of mindset is so very, very important. And once you look at the bigger picture, as Helen was mentioning, then you can look at it as I need to start with this, then I need to start walking a little bit or whatever, but also celebrating that as time goes on and seeing how that really is benefiting yourself to experience that. Let the experience become not only external, but also internal reflection.
I would concur.
Okay, perfect. And so before we're going to talk into GLP-1s, but before we talk into that, just a little bit in towards of since the book is the no diet way, and negativity towards dieting, that something that I feel people tend to think, like you said, is restrict yourself, restrict yourself. In that manner, I have read more on the sense of not restricting yourself, but maybe limiting your intake. Maybe don't completely deprive yourself of these things. You still want to, don't stop eating donuts completely. You can still have a sweet treat once in a while. Is there any like advice, any mindset behind that people think, oh, I have to cut all of this out and then they're going to end up purging it? Just that's like a big thing that we see in this new year, that they're like, I'm done with chocolate. And then they're going to end up eating like a pound of chocolate in like 2 weeks. What is there behind not cutting it all out, but limiting, or I can't figure out the word that I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean? Makes sense?
Okay, all right. I'll go ahead and address this. And you're absolutely correct. So, um, one way just to flip the coin is to say, okay, what do I need to put back in my diet? So rather than starting with what I have to take out, let's start with what is missing. And so I frequently will start individuals and say, tell me what you eat. I analyze it. I see what nutrients are missing. I go to foods that they like, and we start to reinsert foods that haven't been there. As a result of doing that, and also feeding the body throughout the day, the cravings decrease. And so in doing that, you automatically, it's kind of like, you fill a bucket, and then if you keep filling it, it's going to start overflowing. And the same principle can hold true with your diet. So you start putting in a balanced diet into this bucket. Eventually, there just isn't enough room for other things, and it just kind of falls to the wayside. If I can also interject, though, quickly, we also know, and I may have addressed this before, that our food can become, to a certain extent, addictive in nature. And I'm using air quotes here. Primarily because we know that combination of salt, sugar, and fat creates a strong desire to eat. And in laboratory settings, I'm always saying this, lab rats will work equally hard on the lever for that combination as they will for heroin and cocaine and meth. And when they do the MRIs, the same pleasure sensations light up. And I think we can all relate to that because we've all had our donuts and our chocolates, and most of us love that. And it does give us a good feeling. So some of us have what I call trigger foods. If it's a trigger food, it's probably going to trigger you. And so you have to be careful. But even if you've eaten well, they don't trigger quite as difficult, as hard as otherwise.
Yeah. So I would say too, I think that it's less about deprivation of really good foods, as Helen has alluded to. And I think portion control becomes almost everything. And that does require some element of discipline. You can really like something, but you don't necessarily have to eat all of it or gouge with it, particularly when we go out, loaded with salt, loaded with everything. You can, hell, I'm going to just eat a third of this. I will take the rest home and say that I think portion control more than anything is very critical. And I think as Americans, we like big plates of things. We like all of that. But when you look at any of the data over the past 30 years, portions have increased by about a third, size of a piece of pizza, apple, and all of these things. But the reality is smaller portions are probably the key to why some countries, France, others seem to do better as far as their weight control, not necessarily eating perhaps heavier foods at some level, but it's portion. And I think that's hard for patients to sometimes understand, that really it's about that. And also, as Helen alluded to, the mindless eating, just you're grazing, just you're not really keeping track of it. So managing it, being mindful of what you're eating, when you're eating, all of the timing is critical. timing is critical. Typically I advise patients, don't eat really much after 6 or so. Get at least 3 hours before you go to bed because 1, it'll keep you up, definitely. 2, you're more apt to crave later on. And when you eat late, you're more apt to your sleep won't be good, which disrupts your circadian rhythm, which disrupts your appetite for the next day. Increases ghrelin, your appetite's up, and it's all disordered. It all comes together as a part of what we call the homeostasis of the body. And healthy eating is probably the root of all that, foundational to healthy living, healthy sleep, and of course, a proponent of exercise. All one.
But I think it's important to look at what we're talking about in the book and the points you just sort of mentioned. These are foundation, and it's so contrary to what people usually believe. We call it the gulp effect. If I asked either one of you to hold your breath for 3 minutes, no matter how much you wanted to, or 4 minutes, and then once you couldn't do it, you say, well, I failed again. No, your body doesn't allow you to do that. And so what you would do is a gulp, for air. Well, that's what happens with people. If we restrict. So the things that we're talking about are practical ways of using food, using the process to really help yourself so that we don't get caught up in that negativity once again. Because all of these things are circular.
So this is a perfect transition into, we talked about how we're mindlessly snacking and whatnot, right? So a big thing that we want to talk about today is GLP-1s. And what has been out there is people also are using GLP-1s to calm down their food noise, which is that constant snacking. But the thing is, after you go off of these GLP-1s, does that food noise just come right back? If you aren't creating a healthy routine of fixing it before you go off of the medication?
Well, the answer is resounding yes. These studies are now coming out, one after the other, that shows the weight gain is substantial. And you stop this, and that food noise comes back in mass, tenfold, and they eat more. Let's be honest, the GLP-1s are not really a physiologic way to lose weight at all. Do they work? Yes, they do. But are they sustainable? You know what the data is now showing? No, they're not. How could you have a drug that 60% of patients can't take after a year? We failed. It's worked in the short term, but we know that for longevity and lifespan and health span, you need sustained proper weights, sustained healthy weights for years. If not, it's impactful. It's almost akin to the yo-yo-like dieting that had occurred with really low calorie, because that's what's happening with it. And you're talking to someone who prescribes these medications, have used these medications on patients, and they have been incredibly effective, but people can't stay on them. The pharmaceutical industry has tried to say, well, this is like an antihypertensive medication because obesity is a chronic disease. And perhaps there's some merit to that, but the reality is you can't stay on these medications like an antihypertensive medication for 20 years. You can't. No study has shown that. Now they're trying to come up with other formulations of this, oral and such. The problem is it's just simply not physiologic. And now we're starting to get some real red flags of concerns. Bone loss, significant muscle loss. You're now seeing, I think, on television, this wellness company, they're trying to promote this kind of over-the-counter weight loss and then they supplements that make you keep the weight if you take these medications. This is all starting to spiral out of control, much like previous, fad diets and fen-phen and medications like that started to fail miserably. We're now right there. And that is exactly what's happening, because Americans typically always look for a quick fix. How do I lose this? And these meds, in that sense, do work. Now, is there a role for them? There absolutely is. In diabetes, remarkably effective. But for weight loss, the better way to do it is to our lifestyle management and read our book and apply those basic principles. That works for sustainable weight loss, which is needed for longevity, health span, reducing all the comorbidities. These meds long-term, the data is now showing that is not the answer. So I'm coming out against it. I'm saying probably not a good idea. Work with a qualified physician, team, nutritionist, psychotherapist to help you deal with the root cause of why you're eating. And I think that really is about what our book is about. There it is. There's no other book quite like that about lifestyle management.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on food noise without GLP-1s. How do you work with your clients, that people that do have food noise? Because I have quite a few people in my life that have it, and I find their issue is they tend to still surround themselves with the food. What is your advice without GLP-1s of how to work on reducing the food noise?
I think it goes back to putting the team together, and that food noise many times is a psychological issue that really needs to be addressed in therapy. If an individual is using food to manage their emotions, well, they have to learn what those emotions are about and better understand them. Otherwise, they'll continue. It's really interesting, and fen-phen, Dr. Terry just referenced fen-phen, and I worked with clients on fen-phen until it was pulled because it caused pulmonary hypertension, much like we're starting to see now, the negative side effects. But the really interesting thing was many people struggled with a degree of depression when that mind talk stopped and it was a void. And what do they do with their thoughts? And so the providers were, one, hopefully referring to a therapist, but two, starting to explore some antidepressive, anti-anxiety, things like that that could help a person while they were on the fen-phen. But that talk is real. And some people absolutely relish the fact that their minds go quiet. Like they're not thinking of, while they're eating breakfast, they're not already thinking about lunch and dinner and, what's going to happen on the weekend and, that type of thing. And they just are so pleased that their minds are quiet. So I think that takes an evaluation, one, by a dietitian, because we want to make sure that the diet is sound and that some of this conversation in their mind is not coming from a lack of nutrition in their bodies that's just driving that hunger and that constant conversation. But they really need to have on board their physician, but even more importantly, the psychotherapist. So in situations like that, it's usually the psychotherapist is the primary and the physician and the dietitian support behind it. But it's serious. It's serious.
And there's nothing wrong with the individual by putting that team together. People have said to me, why do I have to have a whole team? I can take the medication. Well, as we know, it doesn't work. Once again, it doesn't work. And my concern always is when you have people, and many of the clients I had while I was in my therapy practice, have been in all kinds of approaches. And once they don't lose the weight or the weight comes back on, they're depressed because of that. And so it's important that people realize that is the process. And I call upon the professionals and the head of our, health departments and stuff to say, this is what's needed. You need to have a team of professionals working on this issue, because I think all too often, as we see right now with this whole medication, is that people are trying to grab onto something that's really critical. I mean, the obesity rates keep on increasing. And again, it always comes back to the person, is the person responsible. All they need to do is stop eating. It's not that easy. If it was, we wouldn't be talking today about this. And so it's important to put the team together, the proper team that works in the area and that has that look upon, the approach of looking at this as health rather than unhealthy approaches.
I think to Dr. Bakista's point, is GLP-1s have now been associated with potentially increased depression and anxiety and possibly increased suicidality. It's very serious. So problem is they're not treating the root cause at all. They're just placating, and they're not equivalent to a cholesterol medication, like Lipitor, that you have to be on for life, that we know has long-term benefits, measurable, sustainable benefits on heart disease, unrefutable. They're not that. And that's how the pharmaceutical companies are now pushing this. They're pushing it like, be on this, you'll be on it for life. It'll sustain you. Now, no studies such as that exists at all as it does with, and now all we're finding is more and more studies. Pancreatitis, inflammation was very critical. Gallbladder disease. And up to 44% of patients with significant gastrointestinal effects, like diarrhea, constant nausea, constipation, that are having problems with these medications. So there, I think, is a challenge. So for weight loss, it's best to not start with that and try to start with a comprehensive lifestyle approach, which is achievable, sustainable. And studies have shown that that's what promotes health span and lifespan, not these medications. So it's advertising, it's Madison Avenue marketing at its best. Turn the television on, there's probably 3 GLP-1 like commercials. On Jarnout, Zepbound, Ozempic. Most people probably know the tunes now. It's crazy. And that's what's happening. That's why 1 in 10 Americans at one point have been on one of these medications, and doctors are prescribing it in droves. So I think we have to redirect now. It's time to pivot. The alarms are sounding. They're out there. You're not going to hear them on television or on your advertisements, but if you start looking at the literature and you talk to physicians who are prescribing these and nutritionists who treat these after they fail, you can see that it's significant. So now there's never been a time more than ever to read our book, take our approach, because it works.
Something I really want to kind of circle back and kind of this all relates to is something I loved that Fran said was the person is not broken. It is not them. I don't find that there is, especially when talking GLP-1s and all of this, I don't hear a lot about therapy and that it is a mental thing. I think it is very important for people to hear from professionals such as you that therapy is not a bad thing, that there is still such a thing around therapy that therapy's for crazy people, therapy's for this, like da 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 da, that I've never heard anybody that's starting with weight loss going, I've started therapy, that I have a bad relationship with food. When you have a bad relationship with a significant other, you go to marriage counseling, right? But when you have a bad relationship with food, you're not going to food counseling. So can we talk a little bit about how therapy isn't this scary, bad thing, that it is a part of weight loss? This is something that is discussed in the book, I believe, but is something that also should just be more talked about, that instead of just hopping onto this miracle drug, that you need, like you said, to form a team and a supportive team, because we also have doctors out there that I've had friends say that do body shame them, that do make them feel that it is their fault, that you shouldn't stay with that physician if they aren't serving you, correct? So just how much an important mental is, not only that you're taking something or working on your diet, but also how important that mental aspect is and getting that other physician involved, that other doctor involved.
Well, William Butler Yeats, the poet, once wrote, that the journey internally is not only an important journey, it's the only journey. And for years, I taught out of college. I taught future therapists. And I would suggest to them that they get into therapy. And these are people who are going to be therapists, and they were like alarmed. Well, there's nothing wrong. No, there isn't anything wrong. Or maybe there is something wrong. Then now is the time to work on that. So it's important for that, just foundation is be taking care of ourselves. And it's a real issue. And I like your point that the people that you see, the dietitian, the doctor, the therapist, needs to have the background necessary for that issue, because it's not just a general issue. And I think the more that we hear people and prestigious physicians say you need to be in therapy along with the dietitian, along with the doctor, how important that is, and that we can lessen the stigma. The stigma is a lot less than it used to be. I remember when I first started teaching, students would come to my class, maybe the 14th week of classes, close the door and say, I'm in therapy. Like there was something wrong. And as time went on, it became freer. But along with this, the problem with, I think, obesity is people already feel there's something wrong with them. By admitting that I'm seeing a therapist, that really makes it wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not about lack of self-control. It's not a lack of responsibility. It's really a lack of knowledge, and that we need to fill in that knowledge as much as possible.
Yeah. Look, it really is a team-based approach. And what the medications have done is, again, taken out part of the team. It's a physician prescribing it, and rarely do I now see physicians who prescribe these medications ever refer to a nutritionist, which is so critical to this. It doesn't ever happen, so they're never even eating. Now, for the first time ever, one very good thing about the RFK and HHS, we now have a nutrition curriculum, and actually several medical schools, including LECOM, to which I'm the dean of the Elmira campus, we are actually going to be presenting at Washington on our nutrition curriculum that we put together. So that's a good thing. It's foundational, and that's a start in the right direction. But it's the beginning of potentially changing the way Americans, view food and weight management and such. But it's hard to fight with what the pharmaceutical companies are pushing out there. They're trying to control. In fact, let's be honest, they are controlling the narrative. They're winning. They're winning completely.
Exactly.
They've taken the most critical elements of lifestyle management out and made it back to a shot, and now a pill, taking us out of the equation, taking the time that a nutritionist would spend actually teaching them proper eating habits and lifestyle management. And in some ways, here it is again, the doctor, she or he is writing the script. Here it is, a quick fix American way that ultimately in this situation for weight management will fail. And is failing. It's cracking.
And on a nutritionist side of this, this quick fix, they also need to know about their bodies, because referenced earlier was some people have polycystic syndrome. Some people have other things going on, that they might be diabetic, that they might be have gluten intolerance, things like that. Why is that also important to have that nutritionist in there? Because great, this one fixed thing, but then you get off and your body is not going to diet the way my body is going to diet. That a nutritionist can actually help with your body, know about more than just one body format.
Thank you for asking that question, and I'll do a clarification. There's a complete difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. So I believe it's any state. If you wanted to put a shingle out and call yourself a nutritionist and start charging, you can with no background. You can't bill insurance, but you can market yourself. The registered dietitian nutritionist now is what we're called, because we tagged it nutritionist, because that is what the general population associates with. Registered dietitian is trained in what is called medical nutrition therapy, and we are the only ones. And now in hospital settings, almost every single state, we are the only ones writing diet orders. We write tube feedings. We write TPN, PPN. We do. So if someone comes to us with obesity, chances are they're coming in with something else, be it diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, whatever. The registered dietitian nutritionist is the only one that is trained to not only help them control for the weight, but also to treat that medical condition simultaneously. Otherwise, it's anybody's guess. But I had a thought as I was listening, and I keep agreeing with both doctors here, that if we could maybe change the lens a little bit. That's an old phrase, but I got thinking about my client who wants to run a 5K, or any athlete from, children all the way up to our Olympic athletes. They usually have a team behind them. They have their doctor. Oh my gosh, the therapy that goes on with our athletes into their keeping their head in the game, learning how to focus, etc. And then they have their sports dietitian right beside him. So why is it that within that realm, a team is so accepted and the psychological component so accepted, but when we moved to a different arena where we're just dealing with weight, uh, how did it get lost? Why? I don't understand, because it is so important to an athlete to have their head in the game, to know exactly what they're doing. They learn relaxation, mental imagery, ways to put boundaries around themselves. It's critical, and it is equally as critical. In fact, if you have an eating disorder, I will always tell, someone who's coming to me, whether it's the parent or the client themselves, I will not treat unless I have a full team. I require a doctor, I require a therapist, and then I will proceed, because I can't do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. And I think that's a similar kind of reverse thing that we're seeing with these drugs. And it's not going to work. It didn't work with fen-phen. It didn't. It's not sustainable.
And also, you can't diagnose can you diagnose as a registered physician a eating disorder, or do you need to have that registered or diagnosed from somebody else? Like, you're saying this team aspect that I'm thinking personally, I didn't know that I had like an OCD thing until I talked to my therapist, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you should not use MyFitnessPal because that is horrible for your OCD." And I had no idea, and I stopped using it. I'm like, "Oh my God, wow, look at my relationship with food. This is great." But I only found that out through therapy, not even talking to my nutritionist, because how was my nutritionist, my person, going to know, right?
They're not trained. That's beyond our scope of practice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Clearly a team-based approach to successful weight loss. And I think the book is certainly a start with that. And that's what's broken them with the medications. Let's just put it out there. It's not happening. It's not encouraged. It's a quick fix where you see the doc and they write your med, they monitor your weight loss, and there it is. There's no other aspect to it. We're not addressing any of the root causes of being overweight and obesity. And that's why we haven't meaningfully made an impact, with still about 75 to 77% of the population either overweight or obese. We haven't really done that. We've made little dips, little valleys, but they're coming right back up because these people can't stay on the medications. And there's what the reality. Now, after almost a decade with these meds out there, past 5 years, it's just exponentially increased. Most of the research and pharmaceutical money is trying to get into these drugs because obviously when 77% of the population overweight or obese, they want to get a piece of the action. But it's not working. So I think we're declaring that let's try a different approach that works. Lots of data shows that this approach works for lifespan and health span compared to these medications. That's really the context of our book. That's our message. And, we're not in favor of GLP-1s as a first-line treatment for weight loss. We're not. Doesn't work.
So let's talk about the book in this spec that the three of you are all different physicians, doctors, backgrounds, correct? You are a team yourself. Let's talk about the beauty of this book, that it's not just from one doctor's perspective. It's not just from a nutritional. It's not just from a psycho. This book is a start of a team to give you that idea of how all of those things work together, right?
I'll just clarify one thing. It's not a psycho, but a psycho.
Sorry, yeah, I knew I said it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get grilled for that one.
Certain things, sometimes psycho, but
Not a psycho.
no, it's
Into the therapist aspect.
I think sometimes our book is so simple in a way that people think it's overly simple, but it's complex, and it deals with realities, and it deals with research. It's research-based. We've all worked in this area for many years. My research was on early childhood obesity. So I think in putting that together and putting the book together, as we look at the different issues, it really gives some people practical applications. So every chapter has things that you can actually do or try. And when people do it, they come back and they say, this works. It's a little difficult, but it works. And so I think that's really important. And having that discussion back and forth, so important to have.
Yeah. So you know, there's been a new food pyramid. We talked about in that protein, I think, playing a role in what you eat, the kind of foods and the amount you eat and when you eat. So what you eat, amounts, and when matter as much as anything. It's not necessarily cutting out certain food groups, and Helen can touch more on that. But it's about true lifestyle management for sustained weight loss, not losing 10 pounds in a week, maybe a pound or two over a period of 6 months gets you to a more comfortable baseline that becomes sustainable. Because good health is all about sustainability. It's not the quick fix. It's about the long run. It's the marathon, not the sprint. And the GLP-1s have just given the sprint. Quick weight loss, all of a sudden, lose your appetite. I had the pleasure of having a meal with a couple of patients who've been with me a while. They've morbidly obese, have been on GLP-1s, and have done okay, diabetic, so they need to be on this. But we were having lunch. My patient had a couple bites of whatever. I goes, oh, I'm not. Gosh, what happened? I'm not hungry. I rolled my eyes and said, come on, dude. What do you think? Of course you're not hungry. We suppressed your appetite. You're on this medication. He goes, oh. And there it was. And that's what these medications do. They fool you right there. And I'm not saying there's not indications. Diabetic, yes, absolutely. They work well. But for weight loss and sustainable weight loss, the answer is no. It's lifestyle management, starting with our book and following what we prescribed in each chapter. And I say prescribed. We've given a useful tip in each chapter that you can follow, followed by some suggested meal plans, which are written expertly by a registered dietitian, and what that would look like and how you would manage it. And it works time after time after time.
And speaking again with working with actual professionals, so many people will say, we're going to the protein now. Oh, this person online told me I weigh this much, so I need to be intaking this much protein. You need to be talking to somebody who actually looks at your body, looks at that. Talk to me from that medical standpoint of how there's so much noise on the internet, on TV, on everything about you need to eat this much protein, you need to eat this, supplements. We talked earlier about how it's exactly that you're supplementing. But in your book, you guys talk about lifestyle changes and getting your proteins, your fibers, your whatnot from your foods and creating those better habits. Can you just talk to me about the importance of, one, not forgetting that a supplement is exactly a supplement, but also working with an actual professional that hones in on you, your specific self?
Correct. And if I can just, I'm going to go back just for a second on the book and the lifestyle change and share with you a client who just told me that we've been working together now for approximately a year, and she's doing changing, making the lifestyle changes within the home, the types of foods. And she just took her daughter to the doctors, who's a teenager. And over this past year, the daughter has lost 10 pounds, which was a good thing, but without time, just because of the change of the culture in the home and the beliefs and the thinking of the.
As a result of the book.
Exactly, because that's what we do is what we put in the book. Exactly. But back to the point on the protein, the new recommendations on the new pyramid has our protein requirement much higher than what I've ever seen the research suggesting. And I think it's important that people realize that protein, if not, the backbone of a protein is basically a carbohydrate, which is why a good share of our proteins can be converted and utilized for glucose. Okay. And so what makes protein so special is that nitrogen that it contains. And we have nitrogen side chains, which identify what type of amino acid, which the amino acid is the building block of it. So if we take in extra protein that we don't need, well, the liver can get rid of that through the urea cycle, and the kidney, you have a carbohydrate. If not needed, it's going to get stored as body fat. That is a basic biochemistry process that I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, that there has been a change in the biochemistry there. So this recommendation of these high proteins, to the best of my knowledge, have no foundation. And to speak to the supplements, we want to get our proteins from our foods. If for some reason we can't get there, it could be an issue with chewing. It could be an issue with the current diet that is being prescribed, or they're vegan and they're really struggling. Then, as you reference, then we add a supplement. But you don't add a diet to a supplement. You add a supplement to a diet. And, the same holds true, too, for a multivitamin. People say, well, I'll just take my multivitamin. It's like, no, that, too, is a supplement. Let's find out where the holes are. Let's try to fix it first with food. And then if we can't, I always have to consult with a physician because I can't diagnose or make, write script or anything. So, check with your doctor. If I don't know you had kidney stones and and they're calcium based and I'm recommending calcium, that's not a cool thing. So if I find that I can't fix the holes in the diet, then it's right back to their physician to say, okay, can we go ahead and recommend, it could be just a calcium, vitamin D, magnesium alone, or it could be just a across the board multivite, something like that.
And I think for simplicity's sake, and certainly weigh in, Dr. Battisti, but I would say 1 gram per pound, we're probably good with that, of protein. If you there are others that are recommending 2 grams, but as doctors alluded to, there's no evidence. We'll say this, protein, and certainly comment on this as a dietitian, does satiate perhaps better. In other words, makes you less hungry, simply put. So more protein would help decrease your hungry drive, but you can't just live on that. But yeah, I think I recommend, 1 gram per pound. So if you're 180 grams, which is doable. And in the book, it's prescribed how that can easily be done without supplements. But as Dr. Battisti Fran has alluded to, mindful eating, what you're eating, and but you can achieve that. And with that, you will lose weight. Absolutely.
When people ask me, what was your motivation for writing this book? It's about helping people to celebrate food once again. We've lost that. I come from an Italian background. My life is about food. It's not about quantity, but sometimes they get mixed in there. But it's about celebrating and preparing it and smelling and savoring it. But we don't. People, they see it as the enemy. And they see that they have to restrict themselves. No, indulge in the food, but do it correctly. And you have a team of people who can help you. That's where my motivation for writing the book is, that we can celebrate this important cultural phenomena, which is meals with friends, family, and by self.
And back with also consulting your physician as well as you're working with your dietitian, your therapist, something that you touch on in the book that we talked last time, but I find it very important to talk about, is if you are a medicated person, you also need to be learning about how your medications affect your body. Because a great example is me, how I was on citalopram and I didn't realize that it was stopping me from getting my goals. Now that I switched to Prozac, I've lost almost 20 pounds without really doing anything, because I already made all my lifestyle changes, but this medication was not a weight stable medication. And no one told me that, because I didn't know to ask that question. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know. I didn't even know that the weight stable medication was a thing, because I just went by what my physician prescribed. So the importance of also knowing what you're taking is also affecting your lifestyle.
And there's a whole chapter about that, and that's something in the book. And it's less about giving you the meds that help you lose weight, but get you off the meds that make you gain weight. And the SSRIs are prime offenders. And as are the Seroquels and the antipsychotics, as are other meds. Docs tend to prescribe a lot. They don't always tend to take away. They figure if it's working well, just keep on. The other one that's being offended enormously now is gabapentin. You may have heard about that. It's being used for neuropathy, for pain, and it's being used for addiction. It's used for seizure disorder. It's prescribed I like to say willy-nilly for just about everything. And you end up body, you never get off it. And I'll tell my patients, hey, that's 20 pounds. That's 20 pounds of fluid retention that's right there in that medication that probably has little benefit after long term. And I think that you're absolutely right. You have to go through hey, doc, what drug could be making me gain weight? Look at it and do you need it? Or can I get by with a lower dose? Good point.
That's just something I like to bring up because a lot of people are now getting more into, ADHD medication. They're getting into anxiety, depression, whatever. But you have separate doctors diagnosing and prescribing. But so I went to multiple physicians and no one could figure out why I wasn't losing weight. They were like, you're meant to be 200 pounds. And I was like, I don't think I am. And I felt horrible. And finally, I talked to, I think, my psychiatrist, and she was like, has anybody talked to you about all of your medications playing together and how that one isn't playing well with your other ones? Just how important is it also to take and look at everything that you might be on? Not saying that you need to get off of them, but also if you have different doctors prescribing different things, has anyone stopped and actually looked at every single thing you're on? Because, yeah, we give our list of medication to our person when we go in and say, you're still on all these medications. Are these medications working together? Are they one of my blockers? Is that an important conversation people should also be talking about with their physicians that I have a friend that has bipolar. She needs her bipolar medication, but it was a big thing that she didn't realize. She completely went alcohol sober and she didn't realize how much alcohol was affecting her not able to lose weight loss with her bipolar medication. She dropped 20, 30 pounds after going sober, but she was able to stay on her medication because she needs it. That's in her brain. She needs that medication.
That, and you touch on alcohol, and alcohol is just loaded, empty calories. And there's no health benefit to alcohol. End of discussion. We'd like to think resveratrol and red wine. No study shows that helps at all. Should we have wine for all of the reasons Brandon touched on? Absolutely. Part of pleasurable with a good meal. But anything beyond 4 to maybe 5 drinks per week, unhealthy, increased cancer, disrupts your sleep, affects your appetite, adds unnecessary calories. There's the bottom line. There's no health benefit to alcohol. It's not there. Numerous studies have now shown it. I'm not saying deprive yourself of it because it's part of eating. We need to enjoy that. But anything beyond, in excess beyond that, certainly no more than 1 drink, a maximum 7 a week. I like to say 4 to 5 max of any kind of alcohol. There's no health benefit whatsoever. It's just calories. And it disrupts your sleep. As a result of disrupted sleep, disrupted circadian rhythm, increased appetite, increased ghrelin release, more apt to eat more. And if you don't have good sleep, it's been shown, man, you're screwed up for the next day or so till you start getting better sleep and you get back in rhythm. It's all about homeostasis.
I agree. And another professional to pull into the picture is your pharmacist. So your pharmacist is one that can actually look at all your medications at one time and see them all. Because a lot of times, as you said, the prescribing physician may not necessarily know everything that another physician is, but your pharmacist has it and they're trained. That is their field of expertise. And so sometimes you can reference your questions straight to the pharmacist and they can help answer as well.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I feel not all of us think about because we just go to the pharmacist, we pick up our medication. But they do say, do you have any questions for your pharmacist? That's so good to think about because as somebody who's a heavily medicated person, I've never thought like, oh, yeah, I should talk to my pharmacist about, is this medication playing with this medication, playing with this medication? Because they were all prescribed by different doctors for good reason. But did those doctors look at, does my Adderall play well with my Sunosi, play well with my Prozac? Like, are all of those things happy or are they not? So that's so important because also your pharmacist is there for that reason, right? That not just to prescribe, but to answer.
And I would say now, at the tip of your fingers is basically AI. You can put your meds in. You can search which ones interact, which ones cause weight gain. Absolutely. It's there. And it'll reference every study done to mankind on the internet. And take a look at it. Patients should start doing that.
But should that be used lightly? Because in the sense of AI is, of course, using the whole internet and whatever, but it is using a spectrum. And you should still consult with your primary physician, pharmacist, whoever, because it gives you the answers of what plays well together, but it's not also just looking at you as a whole too, because I am pro AI, but I'm also a little anti. I like it as a tool, but I also like to remind people that use it as a tool to bring questions to your physician, your therapist, your whoever, right?
I would agree. I'm just saying it's your health. Manage it. Use every tool available to monitor your health. Ultimately, you're always your own best advocate for yourself. And that's what is needed for success with weight loss and weight management. It's you advocating for yourself and following guidelines that are proven to work, that are basically the foundation and basis of our book and our message.
And something just to kind of touch onto that is I'd love to get the message from all of you, one of you, is the not giving up, because I've met so many people defeated that they've gone to their doctors and their doctors are like, we've tried everything we can. We don't know. I have personal family that finally they went to a therapist and the therapist is like, you need to go to a new doctor because your doctor isn't serving you anymore. Your doctor might be on the outs of retirement and is just da, 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 and they feel that they're just being pushed off and that there's no hope for them, that they're like, I'm just going to live with this pain, with this weight, with this whatever, that you don't need to stay married to that doctor, that there is others out there and that's okay to do that. I think that many of us growing up with doctors are like, once you have a doctor, you stay with that doctor forever. That's not the case if they aren't serving you, right? That you want to be able to get answers and not, you shouldn't, you need to keep fighting for yourself. You don't want to get to a point where you stop fighting for yourself. As you said, we are our biggest advocate, that if that person's not advocating for you too, you don't have to stay with that person.
The answers are within, Stina. As I just alluded to, that's within you. We're merely advocates. And our book really pushes it back on you. And we'll support that. But no doctor is going to be responsible. We can only advise and recommend. But ultimately, it'll be your choice to whether you make these lifestyle changes, which will be successful. And a lot of patients can actually manage chronic disease simply with weight loss. We haven't even touched on that. We have a chapter on that. Simply losing weight takes away about 30% of high blood pressure. Almost 60, 70% of diabetes goes away with just simple weight loss. And all of those have a significant role in longevity, but mostly dementia. Every study that's coming out now is showing most dementia is probably vascular. And if you have diabetes or hypertension untreated, your chance of getting dementia is as high as 50% more. So it all plays together. And so much of that is based on, lifestyle management. This is why we come out, in essence, against the medication, because the medication isn't sustainable and won't keep the weight off for the long period of time that's necessary to prevent dementia and these other chronic diseases that will occur. Heart disease remains, despite all of the wonderful research in the past 50 years, the number one killer of Americans. Still remains up. Pretty amazing. I believe the reason is because of lifestyle. I believe that's why we haven't been able to make as much of a dent in it. The cholesterol medications, all of that are terrific. But if you're on Lipitor or Socor, a lot of people are Crestor these days, and not managing your weight, you're still putting yourself at risk for metabolic disease and diabetes and dementia and all of those things. You're managing your cholesterol. And a lot of docs are, your cholesterol is great, but you're 250. Pre-diabetic or diabetic. Not treating the root cause.
I agree.
Our book's about the root cause.
One thing that I meant to touch on after the alcohol was another big issue that is around is also people not realizing the impact of cigarettes, vaping, and so on and so forth as well. And I know it plays into the same field, but this younger generation, loves their vapes. They love to just have something. And just the importance of also thinking about a lifestyle change is also getting rid of those kind of toxins that you're putting in your body. Overall, it's all about what you also put in to get out, right? So thinking about these are great recreational, whatever, but as you said, drinks, you only should have 4 to 5 a week. Any thoughts on just people with the habits of smoking, of vaping, of whatever? Because I don't know if you've seen the studies, this generation is moving away from alcohol quite frequently. It is big, but they also have been really into vapes, and there's a lot going on with that. And some people I've heard, oh, I smoke cigarettes because I keep my weight off. That's not good.
That's another addiction and a whole other podcast.
Okay.
Another day. We're talking
Okay.
about weight loss. That's a whole other problem. And
I just figured I'd see if it was out there.
agree with you 100%, but that leads to
Another conversation. Okay, we'll bookmark that for another time. We'll book that for another time then.
I think the key to what we're talking about today is really calling out the drug companies and saying, stop the nonsense. That's what it is. Calling out the government officials, stop the nonsense. I think we're playing to people's fears. I think we're playing to people's weaknesses. I think what we have to do is re-empower people to be able to say, look, this is a responsibility that you have, and we have resources that can help you. And as people start to accomplish their goals, they start feeling better about themselves. The better they feel about themselves, the more they can accomplish their goals. There's a vicious cycle, a positive cycle that occurs. This is a lot of, and the book talks a lot about resources they can utilize for themselves.
And from the therapy standpoint, something my therapist has really given with me is making sure during these lifestyle changes is also making sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are supporting these. Talk to me about that importance, because you can want it so bad, but then you also have your friends, oh, let's go drinking, let's go eating, let's go do this. Like, you don't need to worry about that. You can worry about your diet tomorrow. You want a supporting system around you. You can support yourself all you want, but if you don't have the support around you as well, that can be pretty detrimental, right?
The Blues Always studies, which we know about, the Blue said, people who reach 100 years old in lifestyle. And one of the key, about 3 of the key points are the people that you hang with. The people you hang with, based on their physical activity and their lifestyle change, their lifestyle, it mimics your own. Sometimes people like smokers, when they have to let go of the smoke hut, is like the biggest loss, because it's their connection. So really surrounding yourself with people that are looking at the same. And it doesn't mean when you're working on lifestyle change that you're a good person. When you're not working on lifestyle change, you're a bad person. You have to get away from this good and bad. People will say to Helen all the time, oh, I was bad today because I ate a piece of chocolate cake. Enjoy the cake. Enjoy the cake. You don't have to have the whole cake. Enjoy the piece of cake and walking back from that point, how important it is.
And that's something that's also important. I believe you guys talk about in the book. It's been a while since I've read it, but front to cover, but is this demonization of food. I love what you talked about earlier, because I'm also Italian, is getting back to loving food. It is so demonized of these are your bad foods, these are your good foods, these are this is that. It's just so toxic. And just what is the importance of, like, in your book, you highlight that, I believe you do highlight about that there isn't goods and bads, that it's all in the word I was looking for earlier was moderation, that it is all moderation, because we do deserve that piece of cake once in a while, right? But I don't need to eat the whole cake to get that receptor in my brain happy. I just need that slice that I'm like, oh, yes, cake. Like,
Taste is the number one factor in whether whatever dietary changes are being made, whether they're going to be sustainable. So we could put together the most balanced diet, health promoting, weight balancing, and if it doesn't satisfy the person's taste, doesn't matter. They're not going to stay with it. So, and if you take any food, and I do reference this in the book, take any food into a chemistry lab and just break it down to its nutrient parts. Its nutrients. You're going to find some carbs, maybe some vitamin A, maybe some phosphorus, maybe some, it's all the same stuff. And it's how we put it together to balance it that really matters. There's no good.
Well, I think that pretty much solidifies us for today. Is there anything that I didn't talk with you guys about that you wanted to? We talked about protein, we talked about therapy, we talked about everything, that we are now saying that GLP-1s are, well, we've been saying it, but really coming out saying GLP-1s are not our end all be all answer.
Exploitation of the American public egregiously. And they're ignoring the critical component for sustainable weight loss, and that's a team-based approach. And it's a quick fix that's now cracking and not working because they're taking out the critical component, which is a registered dietitian, which, historically in practice, docs would work and they didn't, we'll refer you to. In fact, many practices had dietitians in the practice. That's all being cut out now. Health systems don't value it. They don't reimburse as they should. Why? Because of the GLP-1s. They've taken out that component. They've short-circuited it. Think of it in that terms. And now there's a problem. Now it's not working. And now I think there's all kinds of efforts to downplay the side effects of these medications. They're even trying to modify them such that they can say, oh, this one just targets the fat. Well, we all know that weight loss can't just target one specific tissue in the body. It never works that way. And you can't make up for it. There's the problem. It's now out there. We're just at the cusp of saying, hey, warning signs, warning signs. No, this isn't for weight loss. Diabetic management, absolutely. Weight